Huntsman Winter's War is the prequel, yet the sequel, to Snow White and the Huntsman, and was directed by Cedric Nicholas Troyan. The story starts off with Ravenna, played by Charlize Theron, and her sister, Freya, who is played by Emily Blunt, as they're basically sisters in this movie, and they have a really good bond with each other until a fatal accident causes them to kind of drift apart, I guess. One being, the evil queen, Ravenna, dying in the first one, and then Freya now being the Snow Queen, I guess, in this movie. Yeah. The rest of this movie is pretty much the origin story of the Huntsman, who is played by Chris Hemsworth, as he is trying to find the mirror that Ravenna is in, because apparently that got stolen, I guess. So he's being helped by some dwarves and his wife, who is played by Jessica Chastain. This movie was bad. It was not really a good movie that I thought. There was a lot of stuff in this movie that could have been much better. It had the big potential for a much better movie when the trailers were coming out. Back forever ago when this movie actually came out, the trailers made it look like it was going to be a great movie, and I was really looking forward to it, although I just now saw it. However, that was it. The trailers was just the build-up for it. There was nothing important for the movie itself, other than the fact that it's, I guess, a Snow White movie? It was based on a novel, at least, so it's gotta say something, right? Yeah. Well, I mentioned that this movie is a prequel and a sequel. I mean, the first, let's say 25 to 30 minutes, give or take, is basically the prequel to, Snow White and the Huntsman. It starts off with the two sisters, basically how they become who they are. They split up. And then, you find out, Ravenna, the evil queen, died, or whatever, mere crazy shit. I don't even know. And then the sequel takes place 7 years later, I guess? It's either 7 years later, or it's supposedly not that long after. This movie was very confusing. The sequel, though, does pretty much, I guess, it takes place after Snow White killed the queen. And so now it's just a matter of trying to make sure the mirror doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The narrator of this movie is Liam Neeson, who, to be honest, is probably the best thing of this entire movie itself. He was the only good part of this movie, because all you did was listen to him. You basically, with him, got to hear a bit of backstory and kind of listen to him, obviously narrate the story. That's what a narrator does. They narrate the story, and Liam Neeson freaking nailed it. That's literally the only good part of this movie. There were a lot of good things in this movie, I guess, aside from Liam Neeson. Like, the visuals in this movie were good. They weren't perfect, and they were good. I like the settings that they chose. They felt very real, for the most part, aside from the fact that it's a fantasy world. They felt very real. There was a lot of bad CGI, preferably with the owl that Freya was using a lot. You could just tell that it was... You could tell that it was very, very computer generated. And I mean, that goes with saying, there's a lot of mythical creatures in this movie, and a lot of them are, CGI'd. But it's a very noticeable CGI. At least with, some movies, the CGI isn't that bad. But with this, it was pretty bad. Oddly enough, this movie reminds me of Game of Thrones. I've never seen Game of Thrones, but it somewhat reminds me of it. So during this movie, obviously, Chris Hemsworth is the main character, and he's the Huntsman. And what is up with his freaking voice?
Aye, we would. But there's a problem. Another woman. A bit taller. Not as pretty, mind you.
He has an Irish accent, but it's not Irish. It's like Irish mixed with British or English or whatever. All there is just that minor little response that you get when you listen to somebody speaking Irish. Not only is Hemsworth's Irish voice pretty bad, but there's a lot of horrible fighting choreography in this movie. Sure, there was some that was decent, but there was a lot that was just making me go like, oh my god. It was so upsetting to watch, especially because Chris Hemsworth. This movie had a lot of really big name stars in it. It had Liam Neeson as the narrator. It had Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, and Emily Blunt. And it was garbage. This movie was complete garbage. I don't understand why this was a movie. This movie is also 2 hours long. Or if you want to be technical, 114 minutes. I have no idea how I managed to sit through all of that. I guess because there was somewhat of a compelling plot. It was there, but it wasn't really touched up on. The whole movie is, them trying to find this freaking mirror to make sure that stupid shit doesn't happen. That's literally the whole point of this movie. But there's not even a whole, that's just, underneath the skin. That's like the main goal, but it's not really touched up upon. The rest of the movie is just basically Chris Hemsworth trying to get his wife back, who is, played by Jessica Chastain. Jessica Chastain played his wife. Her name is Sarah. But that's it. The whole movie is literally just him trying to get his wife back. And then save, the kingdoms and stop this mirror from getting into the wrong hands throughout the entire movie. That's it. That's all there is in this movie. Now, the very last scene in this movie is pretty much, spoiler alert, the evil queen comes back. And she dies again. Because she's the evil queen. But the ending was very non-climactic. The way she died in the very final fight scene between her and the Huntsman was just so boring. It was so bad and sloppy, and I can't even go on. It was probably one of the worst fighting scenes I have ever seen in any movie. I say that because there's a lot of bad fighting scenes, but this one probably takes the cake. It was so bad. It was so CGI'd. It was just scattered. That's all it was. It was just scattered. This whole movie, that's all this movie was just scattered. There was no purpose for this movie besides the fact that, Snow White and the Huntsman was a thing, and they had to, they apparently made some money off that because apparently Kristen Stewart knows how to bring in money. Have you seen her in Twilight? Have you seen her in the Snow White and the Huntsman? How? At least on the bright side, again, this movie has Liam Neeson in it. That's the only good part of this movie. That's literally it. And the worst part of this movie was they set up for a third. The Huntsman, Winter's War, set up for a third movie. This movie was by far one of the worst movies I have seen this year, and I have seen a lot of really bad movies, but I don't even know why they decided to make a second one. The only thing that actually caught my attention and wanted me to continue watching this movie was basically I wanted to see how it ended. That was it. I wanted to see how it ended. There was some good fighting stuff in it. The acting was pretty good. The acting was actually not that bad. It was good acting in a wrong movie. Good acting in a bad movie. That was literally what this movie was. And I wish that they didn't do that. The writing in this movie was horrible. It was god-awful. I don't know why this was a movie still. I know I've been saying that a lot in this, but I don't know why this was a movie. If you want to go see The Huntsman Winter's War, do not go see it. Unless you want to, if you're a big Chris Hemsworth fan and you've seen the first one, then sure, go see it. But you'll be disappointed. There's no purpose for this movie. I know it came out forever ago, and I know I'm late on this review, but there's no purpose for it. There really isn't. Stop at the first one. The first one was good. The first one was fine. There was no need for a second one. The Huntsman Winter's War, as bad as the movie was, again, had good acting, so it wasn't a total loss. I mean, aside from the box office was horrible. It crashed so bad. But I'm going to give The Huntsman Winter's War a C-. That's a very high rating for this movie, oddly enough, even though I've been just talking complete garbage about it. But again, the acting was good, and there was somewhat of a story. There was a relatively compelling story, so that was the most that this movie had to offer. Otherwise, you could forget this movie. Don't even worry about this movie. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I know this review is probably a bit longer than the normal reviews, and I apologize for that. But I thank you anyways for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe us here on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. And as always, this is Pop Culture Critics signing off.